So I would literally have a little scanner in my hand. There would be an attachment mounted with Velcro to the bottom of my phone, and then I could just go into any place and we scan books religiously. And we could go to Savers and I could fill up an entire cart. If Marky, my wife, went with me, we could fill up 2 carts, and book scanning made us a ton of money. And because of Amazon's changes in the storage fees for books, they increased the fee several times. It wasn't worth the while to send them in and do this type of business with the book scanning. So now these are the type of books that we are selling and doing phenomenally well right now. Hey, it's Don. Today I wanted to talk about reselling books. Now, I'm old school. We go back to the, antique mall days, to the old thrift stores, flea market days, buying boxes of books and stuff, pulling them out and listing them on eBay. We also used to scan books. I used to go to Savers many times a week. I used to have a little handheld scanner that was connected up to a device that was connected to my phone, that would actually have the whole database of what Amazon's pricing structure was at the time for the books, what they were selling for, what we should hope to get, the rankings, and the whole works. And it also was available offline. You downloaded it before you left your house, the app, to this device, and boom, you were able to go into a place that had a steel roof without any internet, like a book sale or a depository sale or a library sale where they say no cell phone use. They couldn't tell. You turn it on before you go, you just have this little device in your hand. If it was winter, they couldn't see anything, and you could just sit there, have a little plug in your ear, and we could just scan books all day long. That's the gist on what we used to do. Amazon's raised the price on storage fees 4 or 5 years ago when we dropped out doing that, and it made it not worth our while. Our bread and butter, that time could have easily just all been $5 and $10 books, because they sold so many of them. In a day, you could sell 100 books if they're the right ones, the right ranking. And you could go to Savers back in those days and scan, 1,000 books in a day very easily in just a short period of time, especially if you knew enough about books to bypass the junk ones. You scanned them already, or whatever the case may be. Especially if they're novels and things like that. Those are really easy, like Stephen King or Anne Rice or something like that. So that's what we did. Savers has since this time closed down. Amazon has since raised the fees 4 or 5 years ago in storage. So what happened was, everybody got smart. Amazon started raising fees. Savers started pulling out or raising prices on some of the books, and it just wasn't worth the while or effort anymore at all to do that. So we had to pivot. Now, I love children's books. I actually have a video just on some of the best children's books to look for. If you want to see that video, I have a link down in the description box, and I'll try and remember to pop one down into the comment section as well. Children's books are always great to sell. We do phenomenally well. But these days, I don't scan books. I like the type of books that you don't have to mess with scanning. The type that wouldn't be scannable for us are always the best. So to be honest, these days, these are what we're buying. The newest book in this lot of books you see right here was made in 1862. You may think, oh, where are you going to run into these? This is from 3 different purchases. The oldest book in this assortment of books you see here is from 1729. If you want to find stuff like this, there's a ton of places to do it. Estate sales are great. Local live auctions are great. Antique flea markets are great for these as well, too. Now, investment-wise, I have about $175 in all the books you see here. These are $15 a piece, and these, I think, were all $5 each. So I don't have a ton of money invested into these. What's special about these is that most of these, well, let me pick one that will give you a great example on that. Not in the greatest condition. What I'm going to do with these $15 each books here, this one's the newest book in this assortment. It's from 1862. And what this is an entire year's worth of magazines that were bound in 1862. Original, the whole works, leather binding, the whole works. Now, the book's not in the greatest condition. Even in just this condition, I could list this in the Civil War section. A year's worth of Civil War magazines, bound leather, original 1862. The biggest factor in here is that it has hand-colored illustrations of fine dresses and clothing from 1862 in here. These on average, each one of these books, and I have 5 of them for $15 a piece, $75 invested, each one should probably get me at least $75 a piece. I could increase that even farther if I were to cut these up, because it actually has, from 1862, patterns for stitching from 1862 in color. And let's see if there's one in the front here, or I'll have to flip into the book a little farther. Here's one. This is Le Mode is what you'll see, or Les Modes. And this is hand watercolored. Pink dress, green, and the flowers. A little bit of color here, some yellow, and the whole works. If you go to any antique store, probably, or big antique mall in the country, you're going to see framed versions of these from this magazine and from 2 or 3 other magazines with the same title, same era, same watercolored image, running for $35 to $45 in a frame. $5 frame, you list them up on the wall. For 15 bucks, I got 12 of those, 12 illustrations per actual each one of these books. So 12 times 5, I've got 60 illustrations. If I just sold them as illustration out of the frame, 15 bucks a piece. So 60 times 15 is what I'll get out of the $75 total investment on these crapped out, I'll say, and that's what most people think, books. People won't know that these are still worth it. A lot of people just think that's printing on there. Some of them are very, very nice imagery in here. I was able to get them 15 bucks a piece because I bought them in a lot and I didn't care that some of them were damaged. That's a way to, hopefully get a better price. Well, some of them are damaged, the spine shot out, some of the pages might be loose. Now, if you followed me for any length of time, or you're in my Patreon or YouTube membership group, I've purchased books older than these 1862 books, and I've torn them apart. We've separated them. And I bought a 1773 book, Colonial, for 15 bucks as well. No cover, pages missing. But what was in that book, similar to this one, were inserts, similarly, of engraved sheet music. And we ended up making out of that $15 investment out of that one single book. And I haven't even sold them. I haven't even listed the actual hardest or best material out of there, which would be the magazine newspaper inserts of the individual weeks and months that were in this other book that was very similar to this. The sheet music's already made us $400, almost $500, $489 I think is the exact amount we've sold out of that $15 purchase by tearing the book apart. I've done map books just like the atlases and things like that, plot maps. Great, especially if they're watercolored interior maps and things like that. Many times those scrapped out books that most people will pass on or just say, hey, $5 if you want it. I can buy it, I can cut it apart, and I can end up selling it for 50 times my investment sometimes. Now these right here are random books. The newest one in this lot I think is 1848, the newest one. Now I love children's books, and those are some of my most favorite books of all times and what I like to sell because I love the artwork in them. I love doing artwork. We've got some of our own kids books in the works. I have a coloring book coming out next month or towards the end of next month. But as well, I love what are called miniature books, and this lot here has 3 miniature books in this lot. Now the last miniature book I sold, geez, I want to say I got 100 and some odd bucks for it, but on average I don't think I've sold one for less than 75 bucks a piece. Some of these books date back to the 1811 era. I've got a couple in here that are 1800. As I said, there is one in here from 1729. These miniature little books here I do phenomenally well with. Topic-wise, this one is 1836 on this one here. I'm not really worried even about the topic. This one's 1813, right on the cover. This is an early hymnal right here. Large number of these can be religious. This one's 1837 on the inside. I'm going to be putting 150 bucks a piece on the miniature books. Now, the person I purchased these from didn't even mention that they were miniature books. I bought them from him on an auction that he personally runs, with just a couple of photos that were shown to me. So at that point, I didn't honestly even know that they were miniature books, but even at the price, $5 a piece, I couldn't go wrong because there's some first editions, some early ones, some southern printed books from the 1830s, which are extremely scarce compared to northern material from that same time frame. There's a Native American book right here. This is on the Cherokee Nation. Christian Indians of the Cherokee Nation is what this one's titled. This is the first edition. It's actually signed on the inside by the author. It has some other engravings in here, including a nice one at the front piece in here. It's an 1825. This one's reprinted many, many times in the modern day. It is still a decent seller on Amazon right now. The modern day, even the print-on-demand version is still a big seller. So this book here should get me some good money. Later pressings, I've seen copies selling for $100, $125 for later editions. So, you know, this one might be one of those I'll contact Heritage auctions. I've seen wonders, had no bad experience ever with Heritage, so that's one I personally recommend to people. Now, again, there are some very early books in this lot. Let's see here. Sometimes it's hard to tell in some of these early books which direction they're running. Now, this one's from 1729. Covers off, it can be repaired. I don't worry about that. That's not a huge ordeal. In some of these books from this time frame, you can tear them apart and sell individual pages out of the book for $5 to $10 a piece. Now, $5 to $10 a piece may not sound like a big ordeal to you, but when there's 200 pages in the book, you only need to sell a handful of them. When you buy a book for $5 to make any kind of good money, it's well worth it. You can list these in the Revolutionary War section as well as a colonial era book, and these still sell in there. On average, I get around $45 to $55 for most random books, even if they're not worth a ton of money, normally in the colonial collectibles section, military section under collectibles. Again, if there's illustrations, engravings in here, which this one has a couple of them, those can be cut out. 1729, original engraving, laid paper, the whole works. Laid paper is just the style of paper that you would find in these books. So if you hold it up to the light, you'll see lines, horizontal lines running through it. Or if they cut the paper differently, you might see vertical, but it's almost always horizontal. Those lines are how they've laid out the paper when they were making it on the screens that they used back in those days. Sometimes even the paper has a watermark in it, or a royal seal or something like that. There used to be a chemical, and I don't know what they use these days, but hydrotetrachloride was used back in the days for stamps to find watermarks. You can use that same type of material to find watermarks on pieces of paper if you didn't know that. Secret messages and all that kind of stuff. Now, some of the books in here are educational, arithmetic. Now, I've been buying like McGuffey readers and things along that line for years, probably 15, 20 years. If you don't know what a McGuffey reader is, please look it up, because there is some value in some of the first editions of the McGuffey readers. A McGuffey reader was basically just an educational book from the 1850s, 60s era, the original ones, like a Webster's dictionary from the original time when Daniel Webster was alive. Those do carry some value as well too, but some of these do extremely well. This one's from 1838, and sometimes there's illustrations, engravings, and the whole works. Sometimes the math in here is kind of screwy and things like that. So it just depends on who wrote it, but most of these I get easily $20, $25 for on just the cheaper looking ones like this one here. Hymnals I do extremely well. Also, this is on Christianity. Professions is not principle. The name of Christian is not Christianity. Author of Decision. Now, sometimes there's inserts in here. Sometimes the pages don't line up. That's typical of these time frames. This one's from 1824. Sometimes the location of where the book was printed can add to the value. The pages aren't lined up right. This is a cheap local printing. There may have been only a couple hundred of these of the very first one printed. Some of these can do extremely well on Amazon, believe it or not. These old books can still be listed on Amazon. Now, we're ungated on collectibles, so I don't have to have an ASIN number or anything else like that. I don't have to have permission to list these sorts of things on Amazon. So for us, works out great. Most of these types of books, the average person wouldn't probably need permission or ungating to. Most of these should be openly available. They're all public domain. So, you know, there shouldn't be any locks or anything else like that. A treatise, Nature and Benefits and Importance. John Mason. Now, the names and authors on some of these was part of the reason these specific ones I bought. Somebody's mounted some cheap calfskin leather around it. The original binding's under that, though. So I might actually take this binding off and show it. So this is basically a book cover made, stitched on. I even look at the signatures on these books, because in some cases I found autographs by the author giving it to somebody, and that could add a couple $100s to the value depending on the book. None of these are going to be something that you can scan or look up. Most of these sorts people are going to pass up because of condition, thinking they're not going to be worth selling that way. Most people hate to cut up books or don't even think about cutting up books, so I do extremely well because of that. Even religious-wise, a lot of people pass up on religious stuff. I do extremely well on it, so I always buy it. Just the engraving on the front of the book could get me 20 bucks, you know, depending on who it is and how famous he is. This is from the American Tract Society, why I bought that one. I sell Victorian trade cards. I sell a large number of Victorian items, silk items, photo items, religious items. The American Tract Society has a collector base. They've been around since, I think, the 1850s, but I know 1870s through 1890s I've been selling their stuff like mad. Some of their trade cards you can find in here, bookmarks you can find in these sorts of books, and they do extremely well as also. So these give me very little competition. I had no one else looking to dig through the box of these sorts of books. They couldn't scan them. They look dirty, dingy. They don't know anything about the authors. They don't know anything about the type of material that it was. Most people pass up on anything religious. A lot of people don't even realize that there's hand, colored images in them. This one's from 1810. So this would be hymnos, War of 1812 era. I could list this in the military section as well. You're gonna find somebody who collects War of 1812 material that would love to have something from that time frame that a soldier could have carried into battle, and stuff like this was something they carried into battle. This is this one's 1804, mercantile, arithmetic, commerce of the United States in the domestic and foreign relations. Michael Walsh, he is someone who is known. 3rd edition. If this was a 1st edition, this probably would have been worth some good money. Even though that's a later edition, people collect this sort of thing, especially these days, because it's changed so much from the early days of this book from 1804. These books, I'm going to be able to probably list them fairly high, 125 bucks, and we'll just play around with the price from there. I'm not going to flip through all of these, but I think you get the idea. The books that I do far better on all the time, 1804, Solomon, Temple, Spiritual Eyes, The Water of Life, John Bunyan. Again, these are people that I know the names of because I've been selling in this category, in this area for, 20 years plus. I sell similar items like the trade cards, religious-related cards, memorial cards, religious artifacts, relics, and so this kind of ties right along with it. Now also there's an atlas in here from the 1830s that has hand-colored maps in it. Now again, if you're in my Patreon or my YouTube membership, we're going to look at some of these in depth, and I'm going to point out some really good things to look for. I'll probably tear apart one of the books in those videos as well, so you can see exactly where the value is. This is something I've done over. I've got videos on it, especially in my Patreon and YouTube membership group, on how I've made hundreds of dollars with individual books just like the ones I'm showing you here on a routine, constant basis. These are no-brainers. They don't make anymore. Once you figure out these areas or these types of books or miniature books or even kids books, you don't have to learn new ones because, they're not making new vintage items. So I stay to these types of materials. These are low-lying fruit for us. I can pick up a couple quite often. A couple times a week I run into some books of this age, this time frame, for really reasonable price. And in the 9 out of 10 times, the reason I can get it really cheap is the person has no clue that they're, not worth more than a couple of bucks most of the time. They're dirty, they're dingy, they have issues, page tears, pages don't line up. Again, sometimes they were printed that way. So these are the best types of books for us to sell, buy, and the whole works. Most people don't buy them, less competition. Most people aren't buying them, so they're not listing them. Again, so there's not much competition on most online sites. Most people assume the condition is going to kill, the cover's loose, ripped pages, missing pages, whatever. I don't care. They still sell. People buy things just because of the age. People buy a piece of paper from a book, a leaflet from a book, or a page from a book that's 200 or 300 years old just to have something that's that old. They don't sell for a ton of money. It doesn't have to, but quantity overrules the day. And again, we're going to delve into these in a future video in my Patreon and YouTube membership. I will dive into all of these in a close, in-depth look. We'll spread them apart. I'll break up one of the books. We'll list some, and I'll show you exactly how to sell this sort of thing to make the most money out of it. And again, these books will make me far more than I would make these days if I was scanning books at thrift stores. Our Savers is gone. Most of the other thrift stores do not have options to scan books because they're just junk books. Well, hopefully that gives you some ideas, some thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified if I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell all your friends.
downstairs and learn her in pairs and make the slinkity sound. A spring, a marvelous thing. Everyone knows it's Slinky. Everyone knows it's Slinky.
Slinky sold separately in metal and plastic.